Welcome to the Compact Murder podcast from compactmurder.com, the show where we explore murders, murderers, serial killers, and assassinations. This is episode 45, Albert Fish. Albert Fish, also known as the Grey Man, the Werewolf of Wisteria, and the Brooklyn Vampire, was one of the most monstrous figures in American criminal history, a man whose depravity was so profound that it shocked even the most jaded investigators. His crimes spanned decades and targeted the most vulnerable members of society, children. This is the story of a man who personified evil, a man who believed he was a messenger from God while committing unspeakable acts. Albert Fish was born Hamilton Howard Fish on the 19th of May 1870 in Washington, D.C. His early life provides a chilling glimpse into the development of his twisted psyche. His father, a man in his 50s, died when Fish was only 5 years old. His mother, struggling to cope, placed him in an orphanage soon after. This institution, the Washington Asylum and Jail, was a harsh and brutal environment. It was here that Fish's fascination with pain and his bizarre religious beliefs began to take root. He later claimed to have been beaten and abused at the orphanage, experiences that he said contributed to his masochistic tendencies. As a young man, Fish moved to New York City. He worked various odd jobs, including as a painter and a carpenter. By all appearances, he was a quiet, unassuming man. He was small in stature, with a slight build and a high-pitched voice. He married Anna Mary Hoffman in 1898, a union arranged by his mother. The couple had 6 children, but his family life was far from normal. His wife eventually left him, unable to tolerate his erratic and increasingly bizarre behaviour. Fish's criminal activities began to escalate during this time. He was a frequent visitor to orphanages and children's homes, often feigning a desire to adopt a child. This was merely a ruse to get close to his young victims. He would meticulously plan his attacks, often travelling to different states to find new targets. He would lure children with promises of candy, toys, or a job, and then subject them to unimaginable torture. He was a chameleon, able to blend into any neighbourhood and win the trust of unsuspecting families. The 1920s saw Albert Fish's crimes become more frequent and more heinous. He developed a modus operandi that was as cunning as it was cruel. He would attend parties or social gatherings and, using his polite demeanour, charm parents into allowing him to take their children on an outing. His most infamous crime, the one that would ultimately lead to his downfall, involved the 10-year-old Grace Budd. In May 1928, Fish, using the name Frank Howard, responded to an ad in the New York World, which had been placed there by Edward Budd, who was looking for work. Fish posed as a farmer and offered Edward and his friend work and promised to send for them in a few days. However, Fish didn't show, but did send a telegram in which he apologised and proposed a new date. Fish later admitted that he planned to abduct and attack Edward, but when he visited the Budd family in Manhattan, he immediately switched his attention to Edward's younger sister, 10-year-old Grace. Fish then made up a story, stating that he needed to leave because he had to attend his niece's birthday party. He proposed that Grace accompany him to the party, promising that she would have a great time. The Budd family, completely taken in by his friendly and grandfatherly appearance, agreed. Grace was never seen alive again. The disappearance of Grace Budd launched a massive police investigation. For 6 years, the case remained cold. The police had very few leads. They had no idea who Frank Howard was, and Fish had left no forensic evidence behind. The Budd family was left in a state of agonizing uncertainty, not knowing if their daughter was dead or alive. During this time, Fish continued his horrific spree. He travelled across the country, committing crimes in different states, including Arizona, California, and Maryland. He would send anonymous, taunting letters to the police and the families of his victims. These letters were filled with disturbing details of his crimes and his twisted religious delusions. He would often confess to his crimes in these letters, but his victims were so numerous and his crimes so varied that the police were unable to connect him to any specific case. He was a ghost, a phantom who left a trail of terror wherever he went. The breakthrough in the Grace Budd case came in November 1934. 6 years after Grace's disappearance, her mother, Delia Budd, received a letter from an anonymous sender. This letter, which would become known as the Grace Budd letter, was a confession in a depraved and sickening form. The writer described in graphic detail how he had taken Grace to a deserted house in Westchester, New York, and had tortured and murdered her. The letter concluded with the chilling statement, "I had her on my knee, I kissed her, and I ate her." The letter was a game-changer. The police now had a crucial piece of evidence. They immediately began a meticulous investigation. They employed new forensic techniques, including handwriting analysis, to attempt to identify the author. The letter was so disturbing and so specific that they were convinced it was genuine. It was a macabre confession, a taunt, and a plea for attention all in one. The police, led by Captain William King of the New York City Police Department, painstakingly examined the letter. The handwriting was unique and distinctive. It had an old-fashioned, almost artistic flourish to it. They also found a clue in the letter's watermark, which led them to a stationery store in New York City. The store clerk remembered selling stationery to a man who matched Fish's description. The clerk had also noted his name and address, information that had been recorded on a sales slip. The slip was a gold mine. The address was a small rooming house in Manhattan. The police, with a warrant in hand, went to the address. They found Albert Fish living there, a small, unassuming old man. He did not resist arrest. He seemed almost relieved to be caught. The police were stunned. The man who had committed such monstrous crimes was not the towering monster they had imagined, but a frail, insignificant-looking figure. Once in custody, Albert Fish confessed to the murder of Grace Budd. He also admitted to several other murders and to acts of cannibalism. His confessions were disturbingly detailed and filled with references to his religious delusions. He claimed he was a missionary for God, and that his acts were a form of penance. He claimed that the voices in his head told him to commit these acts, and that he was powerless to resist. The trial of Albert Fish, which began on the 11th of March 1935, was a media circus. The public was horrified by the details of his crimes. The prosecution argued that Fish was a sane man who knew the difference between right and wrong. They pointed to the meticulous planning of his crimes and the fact that he was able to evade capture for so long. They argued that he was not a madman, but a man who was fully aware of the consequences of his actions. The defence, on the other hand, argued that Fish was insane and should be committed to a mental institution. They presented evidence from psychiatric experts who testified that Fish suffered from severe mental illness. They claimed that he had a history of masochism and that his delusions were a result of his disturbed mind. The jury, however, did not believe that Fish was insane. They found him guilty of murder in the first degree. Albert Fish was sentenced to death, and he was executed by electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in Ossining, New York, on the 16th of January 1936. He showed no remorse, no fear, and no emotion as he was led to the electric chair. His final words, if he had any, were not recorded. His death marked the end of a long and terrifying reign of a man who became a symbol of depravity and evil. The case of Albert Fish remains a chilling reminder of the capacity for darkness that can exist within a seemingly ordinary human being. His story stands as a warning, a tale of a man who used a grandfatherly facade to conceal a monstrous and twisted inner world. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Compact Murder Podcast from compacthistories.com. If you did, why not leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts? And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you would like to support us more directly, please consider buying us a coffee. head on over to compacthistories.com/murdercoffee to see how. Also, please check out our other Compact podcasts. You will find them all at compacthistories.com. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.